I want to say how honored I am to be here. You, especially people that are going through school right now, you are the future of healthcare. You're it. How you practice, how you choose to show up. And even people who are maybe on faculty, how you decide to help guide and what seeds you plant into people that are going to be serving others. It's the future of healthcare. It's a noble choice you've made. Helping others is one of the greatest callings within human being. It's noble, and I want to tell you, it exacts quite a toll. Helping others without self-sacrificing is one of the core issues ahead of you in your life. Exploring what it means to give without sacrificing. How to give and receive simultaneously. These are the core issues that are going to be in your life coming in the next in your career. In my work within healthcare, I see two basic things happening, two basic issues. There are a lot of other issues. One of them is that because of financial pressures, stays in the hospital are getting less and less. There's a pressure to get people in and through it faster because of cost. There's a movement away from longer-term health care, rehabilitation over time, being able to come back and get help. What's happening basically is that people are going through the hospital quicker and being less prepared. There's less time, less prepared for the life they're confronting and change in lifestyle that's happened after they're leaving our healthcare system. What's really pretty short-sighted about that is that then they're going to end up back in faster. That's what's going to happen. But financial considerations are on the mind right now in our culture. The other thing, and I think equally disturbing as I go around the country talking to people, is I'm seeing tremendous burnout within healthcare professionals. They are forgetting why they're there. They're not staying nourished. They're not being healthy. They're losing track, feeling constrained. I've been around so much of people who have entered what they do with the noblest of reasons and losing track of it pretty quickly and suffering. So we're in a situation now where the people who are caring for the people that need our help are themselves really suffering. I want to tell you and get across to you tonight that these issues are deeply connected. They're very related, and I'm going to try to get across to you tonight that a mind-body approach to the healing and recovery process, a mind-body approach to the delivery of health care is a solution to both of these issues. They're very related. Now, I'm going to try to use my story to help you believe and help you see what a mind-body connection is and how it might be this practical. I actually think it is so important. And I also want to get across to you tonight that a mind-body approach to healthcare, a mind-body approach to healing and recovery begins and ends with you, the caregiver, more than you know. And I don't mean that. This is good news. I don't mean you have to learn another thing, you know. I mean that you need to include yourself in the healing process at a deeper level than maybe you understand. Now, knowing yourself, the famous line, "Know thyself" by Socrates, know thyself, know thy boundaries, know those types of things. It's going to be crucial for you coming forward. That type of endeavor, that type of exploration can't be learned just from a book. The knowing your own humanity, knowing what it is to give and to receive are not something you can be taught in school, in a classroom. You have to explore. I can't tell you how visionary I think this lecture series is. And it's interesting because when you're in the throes of education, when you're in the throes of medical school, I talked to a lot of medical students, they don't think they have time for this part of themselves. This is a trend we have to change. So in order to get these kind of lofty abstractions across, I'm going to start telling you stories. My story, my personal story. Just because I like saying this, and I also believe it's true, stories are what shift consciousness, not knowledge. Stories are what inspire, not knowledge. 2 + 2 = 4 is a very cool fact, right? It really helps you when you're counting apples, and it's not going to change. It's not what inspires you to action, though. Inspiring you to action, inspiring you to change practice comes from stories. We've been trading stories around the campfire for a couple million years. Believe in stories. So I'm here today to mostly just tell you my story to make and help you feel, see, not just with your understanding, but help you feel my story so you can wonder what it means in your life. So before we begin, I want everyone to take off their shoes. Now, if you're over like 70, you might have an excuse not to do that. Everyone else, take off your shoes. You got to let the dogs bark, man. You need to start feeling more in your life. This isn't just in healthcare. This is for everybody. And so have you ever thought at the end of the day, right, one of the ways you let go of your day is you take off your shoes at the end of the day. Do you feel that freedom when you take off your shoes? Yeah, why aren't you doing that more in your day? Why aren't you doing that more? And I just people are afraid of their feet. So when I speak in corporations, right, I actually will go, hey, take off your shoes. And everyone, especially guys in suits and stuff, they look at you and like, no. And then if I really want to cause a revolt, I say, take off your socks. And everybody freaks, right? It's interesting. The feet are the lightning rod for some of our displeasure or distrust of the body. And I just want to give you a little argument for feet. If you were in a dark, sweaty place for 16 hours out of 24 hours a day, how do you think you'd look? By the way, what are you afraid to feel? What is it having your shoes off that's so scary? What is it that makes you sit in the back of the room rather than the front of the room? What's the vulnerability of stepping forward into your life? These are big issues. Like, what is the sensation of vulnerability? Why do we sit in back sometimes? I'm not, and what's great is it doesn't matter what the audience is. I was speaking to a whole bunch of senior citizens, and no one was in the front 5 rows. They were all way back up there, right? And it's like, it doesn't change. This is a fact about human being. We don't quite want to, until you trust me or something, you don't want to come down to the front of the room, because what if I have to get out of here fast, right? You're thinking, I might have to sneak out. This guy may put me to sleep. These are all real issues. So take off your shoes. Sit up straight and tall for a second. These aren't great seats to do that. Remember, I'm a yoga teacher, so I reserve the right to teach a yoga pose at any time through the course of this. Because you know what I believe? That your body should be with me too. I actually, on every level, that's what I believe. That we need to bring our bodies into our lives more. Without thinking that means you have to run on a treadmill. So sit up straight and tall and just feel your feet for a second. And if you have your socks off, did anyone have the courage to take off their socks? Anybody? There's one. Did anyone come in flip-flops? No, no one did, But I would. Are you scared about the germs on the floor? I don't know. Feeling your feet, letting the dogs bark. There's another one. Just don't keep it at socks, though. Let's keep everything else on. All right? So just feel your sits bones for a second. Lift up through your chest. Ground your feet. Broaden across your shoulders. Don't lean against the back of your chair. Oh my God. And then lean back again. Lean forward again. Lean forward again. Feel your heels down. You feel your inner thighs more? I call that the forgotten country. Right there. Slouch back. Notice the dullness in your legs. You literally feel more when you sit up straight. Right? Sit up straight again. Ground down through your heels. Lift your chest. Broaden across your shoulders. Remember to breathe, though. So guess what? And then lean back and feel how it gets less clear in your legs. The sensation is more like, and we think this is relaxation. The one where you lean way back and let your legs splay out, I call that channel flipper posture. But guess what? I want to like set a framework. When I lean back like this, and when I sit up forward, and just like you feel more in your legs, so do I. I'm going to show you that over the course of this time together. That this level of sensation that you take for granted, here, you lean back, you lean forward. That level of sensation transcends physical trauma. It transcends my severed spinal cord. That level of sensation is not in our rehabilitation model. But before I get too far along with this, so when I start talking about presence within the body or the mind-body connection, I want you to keep referring back to this really simple idea of notice when you lean forward and ground your feet, you feel more in your legs. Where your mind intersects your body in your experience is presence. That's all I mean. That's all I mean. Our healthcare system is making us less present in our bodies. It's as simple as, so I'm done. We don't need to talk anymore, right? But I want to show you now a video. Our nonprofit won $100,000, and I won a Volvo for Life award in 2008. And for the price of a small house, they made this 4.5-minute video. And I asked for the money instead, and they said no. I want it for the nonprofit. But they made this, and I get now why they did this. It's because it's a context to talk about what's going on. So we're going to watch that right now. It was a devastating car accident. My father died in his seat. My sister, she was 20 when she died in a car accident. All the 5 of us, 2 dead, 2 alive, and me hanging on the balance, because I was touch and go for so long.
His internal organs weren't working, he couldn't eat.
Yeah, the doctors literally kind of intimated to my mom that maybe she just let me go. But she couldn't.
I sat beside him and I told him that it looks like you're going to live. Yes, you're going to be paralyzed, and there must be some reason why you're going to live. You're going to probably do something really good.
Like I remember when I came back from the notes that I was going to dedicate the rest of my life to yoga. Remember that conversation? He looked at me, went, okay.
People who just have their bodies, so you lost part of that, but you were always going to work with your mind.
I'm actually doing all the work I'm doing because I want a healthcare system where it didn't take me 12 years to reconnect my mind to my body. I was so shown by the doctors, by everyone involved, what might go wrong with my body, not what was still there and could go right. I'm advocating to get that message to patients.
For 40 plus years, all I've really been is just an upper body person, really kind of ignoring and not paying too much attention to that lower part of my body. It's hard to even describe what it means to feel like you have a whole body.
And let's get the connection to the heels again. Find the center.
I was boogie boarding with my sister and my sister's boyfriend, and the wave just knocked me down. I immediately couldn't feel anything. I spent about a year and a half bouncing from hospital to hospital. The doctors didn't really give me much hope. If I hadn't met Matt and learned what I have learned from him, I would feel more defined by my injury than defined by the person who I am.
Push up through the heel and the ball of the foot of the up leg. Extend up. I know it's working with my students.
I've been working with his students for 6 years. Matt does have an uphill battle in the medical community in convincing them that this is a worthwhile program. But I'm a physician, and I got it, so I know that other people will.
With the vets that are returning now, we need to bring it to the next level. We need a mind-body approach to help them heal and recover. What I do with yoga is really ordinary. I just want to be present in my body. This simple thing of just actually listening to my own experience. It's not only changing the life of people with disability, but it's going to end up being, a different way to approach to rehabilitation. The goals of my work and mind-body solutions are to get my story out to as many people as possible. So we're trying to inspire both the patient and their family and the caregiver and the doctors and the nurses and the PTs and the OTs to believe that they can practice in a different way.
I absolutely see Matt's work as having an influence on how I view my patients, how I treat my patients, and I think how well they're doing.
We're trying to inform them by developing curriculum and techniques to help them train differently so they can interact differently.
I hope I'm living proof that this does work. I hope people do begin to accept it more.
The real frontier is getting the patient more engaged in the healing process.
Matt's teachings just kind of give you the ability to connect at a different level than personally that I'd ever dreamed possible.
Healing is an art. We've gotten lost in thinking it's just a science. Or if you had told me as a 12-year-old boy that I was going to be a yoga teacher, are you kidding me? I would have said no way. The unthinkable is possible, and that's part of what I know. He fell off a tractor when he was 3. Broke his back. His legs didn't quite grow the way that they would have otherwise. He never remembers the sensation of walking. Came to my class probably a couple years ago now. I think he was like 43 at the time. And took one class, drove home that night weeping because he never knew it was possible for him to feel his whole body. No one had ever guided him to trust and believe and appreciate in his own experience. I'm working for a healthcare system where it doesn't take Kevin 40 years to reconnect to his body. My idea is very simple. If people leave the healthcare system more connected to the body rather than less, they're going to take care of it better. This is low-hanging fruit. That's what I said when I was talking at the Mayo Clinic to their international symposium on healthcare reform. We can do this. It can just become part of our system. We can teach mind-body awareness. But that story begins with you, begins with your experience. So I want to talk a little bit more about my story. You heard I was in that car accident. That was my mom, by the way. Could you tell? I love my mom. I went to sleep in a car when we were driving from Kansas City, Missouri, back to Duluth, Minnesota, where I'm from, and we just hit preferential icing going over a bridge, going over an overpass, and tumbled down the embankment. And you heard my father and sister were killed, and I broke my neck at C1, I broke my back at T4, 5, 6, I broke both my wrists, I filled one with fluid, and I sustained an injury to my pancreas that left me unable to eat for nearly 2 months. I went from 119 pounds to 79 pounds. So I went down fast. Back then, back in 1978, they didn't have the right nutrients to feed you through the neck to keep you as nourished as they do now. So we were waiting for my digestive system to wake back up. So I was very injured. One of the things that saved my life, and this is an amazing story, the caregivers, the nurses in Des Moines, so I woke up from a coma. I was in a coma for 3.5 days. Woke up in Des Moines, Iowa, in Mercy Hospital, and the nurses came up to my mom not too long after I was there and said, "You gotta get him out of here. The care's not good enough." And they said this without the doctors knowing it, right? And what they were worried about specifically was that I had broken my neck at C1, and they were rolling me from side to side, but they only put on a soft collar neck brace. So it was hurting so bad that I was passing out, right? And they were worried that could get unstable. So although they didn't want to, they just knew from a nursing perspective that this was unacceptable, and that it was a harbinger of the care that the doctors weren't fully getting how much care I needed. So they said, get him out of here, get him to Mayo. And the doctors didn't want to sign the release to let me go because they thought I'd die, right, for the transport. But the nurses were whispering to my mom, he's going to die if he stays. So it's funny, even 30 years ago, my dad's law partner drove down and said, we won't sue you if you sign right here. That worked. People were gun shy even back then. So I was off to the Mayo Clinic. I'm going to read a scene to you now. It's an intense scene, right? So I want to warn you a little bit, but I don't know if I'm warning you or warning me. This is what I encountered when I got off the mobile home ICU at Mayo Clinic. By the way, I'm a philosopher, and I never knew how to write a story. But I realized that stories are what shift people's awareness. So I figured out how to write a story. I explored my own story, which is what I hope for you. Aggressive treatment is what we wanted. Aggressive treatment is what we got. I am met by a team of doctors and brought into an open area. There is no time lapse. There is only action. A curtain is drawn, and suddenly I'm enclosed in an artificial room. I suspect that this is an emergency room, but there's no telling. The view is not great from flat on my back. The lights overhead are bright and hot, yet my vision is dim. The faces and voices are like shadows, conversations swirling, no apparent direction. I'm surrounded by many bodies. Two men are standing particularly close by each of my shoulders. They whisper to each other right over my chest. The quality of their voices reveals their authority. Crisp, authoritative, calm, with a confident edge. But they have no faces. I see only arms, hands, torsos, and the undersides of their chins. They're holding some sort of hand tools. Unknown to me, I'm about to have 4 metal screws twisted directly into my skull. It is the first step in getting a halo cast, the ultimate in neck stabilization. Suddenly, 2 other men appear from above me and hold down my arms. 2 screwdrivers move toward my temples. My skin breaks. Warmness runs into my hair. The pain is sharp and getting sharper. A horrible sound explodes in my head, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The screws continue to twist into my skull. The pressure is slow at first, building, and then exponential. My head is no longer in 3 dimensions. No space between collapsing sides, just 2 rocks grinding each other. Suddenly, it's done. A semblance of vision returns. Then out of nowhere, it begins again, twisting right above each ear. This time, I am not in that body. There is no subject to that experience. I land in profound silence watching a boy. He is on a table. A sheet is drooped loosely over his lower body. He seems so small. Time is off track, and I am everywhere. The doctors move, but things are held up, stretched out, turned over, pulled apart. A silent movie on a faltering projector. Suddenly, time finds its rhythm. Sounds appear again. The vacuum is broken. A timid voice that I recognize as my own. Somebody help me. A path of realization, big or small, almost always starts bumpy. In my case, I was thrown off a cliff. In retrospect, I realized that this halo experience altered the course of my life. It left me with an insight. At a moment of intense physical pain, the fragile state of my living was able to move away from my body. The potential for dislocation between mind and body was dramatically revealed. The insight, however, was not the ability to disassociate. It was the silence that I experienced while it happened. This silence not only allowed me to separate from my body, but it also was enough to maintain a life-preserving connection. Somehow, I stayed connected to that boy below me. The silence within my consciousness both separated me and connected me simultaneously. This paradoxical insight still guides my life. The silence within my consciousness both separated me and connected me simultaneously. So this idea, that's an out-of-body experience. A couple things I want to dismiss right away. if there was a time-lapse camera in the room, would they have caught a little metaphysical entity floating above the body there? I don't know. I don't care. I want to get across how profoundly I don't care about that question. That's why I left graduate school, why I didn't continue with philosophy. They got concerned with questions like that and what I was reading, right? That doesn't matter. Here's what I know. I know that I was drugged up to beat the band. I know I was almost dead. I know I was in an altered state of consciousness. And I know what I experienced. That's enough for me. I know what I experienced. And this experience, although it seems pretty extreme, I want to put it right into your own experience. We're separating from our bodies all the time. It happens all day long. The mind-body relationship is in constant flux. Most of you, I think, bigger in this room, drive a car, right? Remember that time you're driving down the interstate at 70 miles an hour and suddenly you startle and you realize you haven't seen any of the landscape for 20 minutes? Where do you think you went? What do you think happened there? The brain has the ability to disconnect from the senses. Remember that time you're in class and someone just won't stop talking? It's interminable. Suddenly you're in a Charlie Brown cartoon, wah, 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 and it's just going away, right? And you're off thinking about who knows what, your grocery list or whatever the heck you need to do. Again, where do you think you went? We know that kids that survive, small kids that survive like sexual abuse and trauma early on can't remember. The fact that the mind can disconnect from the body is a survival skill built within the fabric of our consciousness. It's a life skill. The story of waking is the story of the cost you pay if you get comfortable being disconnected from your body. So again, we're in constant flux from minute to minute, from hour to hour, and especially from year to year. Your mind-body relationship is changing. That's one of the central features of your life. We call it aging. All right, so the other thing I want to draw attention to is the silence, which is a big theme in yoga, in yoga, but also in waking. And it's one of those concepts that's kind of hard to get across, but it's very experiential. You all know already what I'm talking about. One thing I want you to know is that I don't mean to draw attention to anything you don't already have in your own experience. I just tried in waking to put a word to an experience or sensation that we all have. I did try to define it, of course. Not very well, I don't think. I wrote this paragraph, just so you know, like over 100 times. Silence is the word I use to describe the empty presence we experience within our experience, between our thoughts, between each other, between ourselves and the world. We feel the silence when we daydream, when we appreciate the beauty of a sunset, or when the love of our life truly walks away. It is an inward sense, often experienced as a longing or an ache. It is a feeling of emptiness and fullness at the same time. The silence is the aspect of our consciousness that makes us feel slightly heavy. It is the source of the feeling of loss, but also of a sense of awe. I think we know what I'm talking about. I often feel on Sunday night, when I know the week's about to start again, I feel that kind of, oh no, that ache, that feeling, right? How about that time you're really tired and there are a whole bunch of dishes that you don't want to do? Or something, and you sit there and you do the dishes anyway, and moms know this experience really well, and they do the dishes anyway. You let the warm water run over your hands, and you're kind of resentful that you have to be the one doing the dishes, and you're kind of in love with your family over the weekend, and you feel it both. You feel emptiness and fullness at the same time. One of the things I want to tell you is this silent aspect of our consciousness is essential in the healing process. Whether you can get that silence in me to move towards connection to the world, or whether it disconnects from the world, will have a huge effect on my engagement with my recovery process. This isn't just a psychological issue. This is how we've diced it up so far. This is a mind-body issue too, and we need to explore that silence. I also will tell you that It's in the silence of your consciousness that stress lands. It's where it's the most, I work with vets too, and I've worked with post-traumatic stress. I'm telling you, the vets that are coming back, this part of their consciousness is what's traumatized. This part of their consciousness doesn't know how to reconnect back to our culture. It doesn't know, it's disconnecting them. Let me jump again. Let's take a teenage girl that's starting to really not like her body, that's actually having, or not just girl, it could be a boy, waking up to more awareness, social dynamic, and yet feeling alienated, feeling like their mom or father is stupid, that no one understands them. This silence in consciousness also feeds alienation and disconnection. And it's something that isn't being actively brought back in the healing and recovery process. And again, I want to reiterate, the best way for this to happen is not through psychological therapy, in my opinion. It has to do with the mind-body approach. But what's really important is this level of your consciousness. I know this from yoga. This is where your actual strength is. Our culture thinks that strength is right here in the brawn. It's not. Your ability to survive, one of the things that I get from my life because of what's happened to me, I've been measured. My life has tested me over and over again. I know that I have strength, and I can tell you this is not where it is. There's a resiliency within human being. That 13-year-old boy that intuitively started to figure out how to leave his body, because after that first experience of the screws in my head, there was a whole bunch of stuff. The first third of waking, by the way, if you want to know what it is like to go through traumatic recovery, read the first third of waking. You'll get a perspective from a 13-year-old boy's perspective that tells you all the things that are going on. And I figured out kind of intuitively how to disconnect from my body to get through it. Thank goodness, it saved my life. I'm so grateful for being able to do that. Because the other thing that's really important, especially for caregivers to understand in healthcare, is that the violence did not end at the accident scene where they think the car bounced over my chest. That's where the violence began. What happened to me in Mayo Clinic and all the way through was corrective violence. It saved my life. I am grateful for it. But it was violence. That screw's being screwed into my head, violence. And I've got a paradoxical message, right? Because it saved my life and it traumatized me. And I still carry that trauma. I just had some body work today on my pancreas that got injured, and by a physical therapist, and I've had flashbacks today from that time. The body remembers. The body feels. The body's part of your consciousness. So, if you think about what happened to me, I want to now switch and have you feel more that my injury, I severed my spinal cord at T4, 5, 6. And I obviously don't feel what you feel. If you tickle the bottoms of my feet, I don't feel it. Most of the people in the room, if I tickle the bottoms of your feet, you feel it. Right? What I experience in this injury of spinal cord injury is a mind-body problem. It's harder for my mind to be. It's a mind-body injury. It's harder for my mind to be in my whole body than it is for most of you in this room. I am no longer an open sore. I mean, when you look at me, given all the injuries I had, I healed remarkably. There's only a little bit of my spinal cord, some tender flesh, beautifully aware flesh that carries electrical impulse and chemicals. Didn't quite come back. I'm not a physical open wound anymore. I've also accepted my condition. I know I'm not going to walk again. Psychological injury, although still here, isn't really the big one anymore. It's 31 years. I figured it out. Right? The injury I live with experientially every day is a mind-body injury. Now, this isn't just about spinal cord injury, and I'm a philosopher, right? So I'm ready to argue at any point, right? But this is true, I think, for almost every ailment that's coming through our healthcare system. But we won't go there right now. But I live a mind-body injury. That's the real injury. But I want to tell you a real pivotal scene in waking, but also in my recovery process. So I live this mind-body injury. But the doctors, and they tell me I don't feel anything below my point of injury, that sensation's over, and I'm going to have to learn how to deal with that, psychological parts of that. But I'm laying there, and it's about a month after my injury, and I'm just out of intensive care, and I'm going, but you know what? I do feel stuff. I actually do feel stuff. And I tell the doctors, and the doctors are well-intending, and they're worried because they view conceptually, they view my injury on two axes. They see a physical injury and psychological and emotional repercussions of that injury. They know that they cannot treat and fix the physical injury. So their perspective with me and their interactions with me are, when I start reporting sensation, are on the psychological and emotional axis of the injury. So they're worried I might not be accepting my condition. Now, as you know, what I believe is that the core injury that I live with is a mind-body injury. That it's got a physical cause, and it's got psychological and emotional repercussions. But here's what they tell me. When I say I have sensation, I feel sensation, they go, oh, no. That's not real sensation. Those are phantom feelings. That level of sensation's not real. And it's as if, a person with amputation is laying there, doesn't think their legs are amputated, feel like they have both legs, and they look under the sheets and they realize they don't have legs. I said, that's what you're having. Those sensations will dissipate and go away. They're just memory, and they'll go away. I was a 13-year-old boy. A 13-year-old boy can be prepared for a lot of things, but a bad metaphysical argument from the people in charge, I wasn't ready for that. And when I said, no, wait, these sensations, I'm talking about my own experience. I'm kind of in a little argument with them. I go, they're even there when I'm not thinking about them. I can get it if they're just my imagination. And so they go, no, here, okay, if you don't believe me, here's what we'll do. We'll call in a neurologist. So the neurologist comes in. It's actually a neurologist's residence, right? And they unzip this black bag, and they pull out these hammers and pins and stuff. And I think I'm about to get tortured, right? It looks a little scary. And they start rolling a roller with all these spikes on my arm. And they say, do you feel that? And I say, yep. And then they roll it on my leg. And they say, do you feel that? And I say, nope. I'm starting to feel a little embarrassed now. And then they take a pin and they poke me on my hand. And then they poke my foot. And they say, do you feel it on your foot? And I say, no. And I start to get humiliated, embarrassed, like I shouldn't have said anything, like I was being bad, right? And then they say, and they actually say, see, where I'm sorry, those aren't real. So they make me an object of pity on top of it. So now I'm really recoiling. Okay? That was a bad metaphysical argument. And sometimes I think I went to graduate school in philosophy just to dismantle what they did. And it's about 5 pages that's no longer in Waking because I realized that I was writing that for me and not for you, right? But believe me, they on the basis of a change in sensation, this being not the same of this, it does not follow that one doesn't exist. It does not follow. They made a bad metaphysical argument. They didn't mean to. That's how they were trained, especially 30 years ago. But I can tell you right now that level of sensation is the cornerstone of my yoga practice. It's the cornerstone of what I go and I'm bringing back to rehabilitation. It's what I'm teaching all over the country. That level of subtle sensation exists and needs to be part of the recovery process. And it's going to have effects both for my body and for my mind. It's going to have a mind-body effect when you start to rehabilitate the subtle sensations within the mind-body relationship. So everybody sit up straight and tall. And if it's easy for you, stand up. If it's not, don't. Start to feel for a second, right? One of the things that you, so one of the things that you lose when you live with paralysis is you kind of lose track of being able to move in more than one direction at once. Now take that in for a second. Being able to move in multiple directions at once within the mind-body relationship, I'm telling you, is a very important thing that you have. Right? So right now, without putting, you see somebody who's got their hands on their hips. Now that's a sign of suspicion. What the hell is this guy doing? What's he saying? What the hell is all this, right? Now you're standing on a ledge, right? I know you're on a slope. But now, ground through your heels, balance on your feet, and stretch out to the top of your head. You don't have to look up. Your eyes. And I said stretch out the top of your head, notice how you went. That would be your mental awareness going towards the ceiling, right? Not your spine reaching up towards the ceiling. It's a very important difference. Stretch down through your fingers, broaden across your chest, and just go in two directions. In fact, add a third. Go this way. In yoga, you learn you have to go down to go up. That's really hard for me to do. Going down through paralysis to feel the lift up. Now notice, don't you actually, they call this mountain pose, Tadasana, because you kind of feel kind of taller and big. And doesn't life usually make you feel smaller? Relax again, slouch back to like what you do at a cocktail party. See how much smaller you feel? And then start to collapse your chest. Maybe this is how you hang out at your desk. You're getting carpal tunnel. You're doing all sorts of stuff, right? This is what it's like to live with disability. No one's pointing out to me how important it is to lift. Guess what? Really important to you too. This simple action of bringing awareness up through the spine while simultaneously grounding down through the feet and breathing is important. Do you see a lot of really charismatic people? Do they go around like this? No, in fact, this is a sign of depression. When they roll forward. Now think about what's happening in the office and at cubicles. They're in a body position that is disconnected from the world. If you think this stress isn't, anyone feel like they're holding up the world with their shoulders? This is the posture that does it. This one changes that. And notice, now slump again for a second, and notice the difference you feel in your feet. Stand up straight again, ground down through the feet, awareness starts to flow. Presence. This should be taught. It should be taught in schools. It should be taught while they're going through trauma. And then have a... This is where one of the points of waking that is really important is that trauma pulls you out of the body. Mental awareness goes out through the eyes. Just like the perfect example is when I told you to stretch out the top of your head and somebody went up like that. Right? That's what it does. It leaves the body. Right? And that's one of the things that people that are going through a hospital, people who are working in a hospital are getting traumatized. When you're around trauma, trauma doesn't happen to an individual. It happens to a whole community. It happens to the caregivers. It happens to everybody. It makes everybody kind of drop their chests. Now this seems like, oh, how could this matter so much? I'm going to tell you, it matters so much. It matters more to my recovery process and to your ability to keep in connection to your job and why you're working in healthcare. It matters more than you think. And I don't just mean posture, right? I mean way more than posture. All right. So if you think about, everyone just for a second, I want you to breathe through your nose. If you're a mouth breather, change. If you have reasons why you can't breathe through your mouth, don't. I mean, you have to, but just for a second, feel how sensual your breath is. Now, if you can, interlock your fingers. Stretch your arms straight up over your head. Take your upper arms together. Take your wrists apart. Press down through your feet, through your sits bones. Broaden across your shoulders. Stretch up to the top of your head. Is anyone holding their breath? Did you notice you started holding your breath? Yeah. Thinking and breathing don't go together.
This is a really big insight if you're studying a lot. Have you noticed, and then release and take your hands down, have you noticed how often people are yawning in the library? When you're reading a good book, you don't breathe very deeply? No one told me that thinking and breathing don't like each other. Now here's the deal. Change the interlock on your fingers. Put the other index finger on top. So if you don't know what I mean, fold your hands, close your eyes, fold your hands. That's how you've done it your entire life. Here it comes. It's going to be crazy. Put the other index finger on top. God, doesn't it feel kind of icky? Like, what the hell? Right? You've just doubled the size of your universe. This is how we're not living symmetrically in our bodies. You never fold your hands this way unless you're a yoga student. Simple things like this. Do you always sit at the same place at your kitchen table? Do you? Sit in the same chair in your living room? Pretty much? Yeah. Stretch your arms up. Again, try to broaden across your collarbones. Now this time I want you to try to smile with your armpits. Broaden across your armpits. Take your shoulder blades down. Don't bend your arms. You remember to feel your sits bones? Feel your feet? Feel everything and breathe? Good. And then release and take your arms down. So I want you to feel for a second. Some of you are getting kind of Yanni on me. And I don't want to feel like I'm boring. So I just got you to move your body a little bit. Okay, so I want to read you a section from Waking where the rehabilitation vision that I encountered was after I'm living a mind-body problem. They tell me to stop listening to sensation below my point of injury. I believe them. I just stop. What's the point? And they tell me the way forward for me is to make my upper body really strong and to drag my paralyzed body through life. That's the vision I encountered. Now, if you think I live a mind-body problem, if you believe that, if I can convince you of that, then taking my body as an object, my paralyzed body as an object, is only going to make my injury worse. I'm going to try to overcome my body to succeed in life. And that's not a good recipe. Basically, for the next 12 years after my injury, I became a floating upper torso. I just basically lived from the upper torso up. And the story of phantom feelings from the doctors, that was treatment. That story had the biggest impact. Besides them saving my life, that story had the biggest impact on my recovery of anything. Right? Because it made me stop listening to my whole body. So I want to read you a quick little passage that tries to describe what I think went wrong with rehabilitation. Imagine walking from a well-lit room into a dark one. Imagine the darkness as a visual expression of silence. My rehabilitation made a mistake with the silence by focusing on an absence of light. It too quickly accepted the loss and taught me to willfully strike out against the darkness. It told me to move faster rather than slower, push harder rather than softer. It guided me to compensate for what I could not see. Another course of action, however, is patience. Stop moving. Wait for the eyes to adjust. Allow for stillness, and then see what's possible. Although a full-fledged vision does not return, usually there's enough light to find one's way across the room. After a while, the moon may come out, sounds may gain texture, and the world might reveal itself, once again, only darker. I was convinced to accept a complete loss of light. First, the doctors replaced the flesh and bones of my legs and feet with stories of phantoms and ghosts. Next, the physical therapist guided me to believe that the only meaningful connection to my paralyzed body was through a regenerating spinal cord. Against this backdrop, compensation was offered. My arms and my wheels, fueled by a compensating will, were to carry me through life. My efforts would aim to prove that the room's darkness didn't matter at all. I would overcome it and become as effective as if the light were still on. But what if I really wanted to be whole? If I wanted to work with the darkness rather than against it? Such questions were beyond the range of my rehabilitation. This view of silence, however, silence as loss, lends itself to a familiar story. We love the notion of overcoming adversity, of succeeding in the face of imminent and probable failure. Short of that, we admire those who refuse to fall without a fight. We are a willful culture and define our heroes accordingly. We strive for victory over the darkness of the room. But what if the darkness, the silence, is a fundamental part of us, of our consciousness? How do we overcome an essential aspect of what we are? That just isn't a vision that's happening in healthcare. That's a vision we have of aging. That's a vision that's rampant in our culture. Right? Healthcare and medical practices, even it's got all this wonderful knowledge, still some of the attitudes and thoughts about human beings and loss and suffering and trauma are informed by such notions. You have to explore some of your biases on what healing is. Is there healing for me other than healing to walk again? Is there healing without curing? Is there healing that's not curing, that's not just psychological? Is there such thing as mind-body healing? I will tell you, there are. This is part of what needs to be explored on the frontier of healthcare. So I want to switch quickly now in the final few minutes back to you. Because I'm telling you, we need to help people stay connected to their bodies. That's a thing, a result that we can make happen with not too much work. Except it's hard work because it's self-exploration. Right? But why it matters. Like, for example, this level of sensation. Oh, by the way, people have and they think, oh, this level of sensation, it's nice, it's touchy-feely, it's yoga. Just so you know quickly, and I don't want to belabor this, but this last June, they stuck my head in a functional MRI at the University of Rutgers, and they grabbed my ankles, and my sensory cortex lit directly mapped to my ankles. Right? They pressed on my bladder, same thing. That it didn't just stay in my sensory cortex either. It flipped over, it jumped over to my motor cortex. It became information for my brain to process as it's moving through space. This isn't touchy-feely stuff. There are subtle sensations in the mind-body relationship that are not being rehabilitated, and they're real. And we need to get them there. And the effect of getting that part of human being back into the healing process will be good both for you and for the patient. It's good for both of us. We have to explore. So these subtle sensations, I'm calling subtle sensations, because now from yoga, right, when you squeeze my ankle, I can feel a surge of energy up my leg, up through my spine. I can follow it. I can direct it. You put sandbags on my legs in Upavista Konasana, my legs are out wide, I can feel it go right up my spine. This level of sensation is real and tangible, and anyone that's done a little bit of yoga has the same sensations that I'm talking about. They're in the mind-body relationship, and 30 years ago it was okay that we didn't know how to do this. It's not okay anymore. We need to start exploring this. Right? But let's say, instead of just calling them subtle sensations, let's get more of human being included in the healing process. How about more self? How about if I say the same thing is just what is more strength? Which I would say that is the source of strength. We need more of us in healthcare. Now the question, the hard thing is for that is that boundaries are tough. Right? You can't fall in love with every patient. If you bring more of yourself and more of your vulnerability into the room, if you come to the front of the room rather than sit in the back of the room and take the risk of that I might call on you and make you embarrassed, right? That's supposed to be a joke, you guys. You guys are getting pretty serious in here. Like that's part of what needs to come forward into healthcare. We have to explore our humanity. But not just like how do we treat the whole patient? How do we take a holistic approach to a patient and treat the whole patient? No, it's not just about the patient. It's about the caregiver. It's about the dynamic that exists between the patient and the caregiver. That needs more attention. And I don't just mean good bedside manner. I mean something more fundamental than that. Okay, so this idea that you need to become more of the process that you're engaged in. Let me tell you a little bit about a study we're doing at the Kurtz Center. We just finished up 2 years of study. I've been training
healthcare professionals and rehab professionals at the Courage Center for 2 years. And all we did, because I figured out the best way to get me, the end user, mind-body awareness, was to teach the caregiver how to be in their own body. But that was the best delivery system. Because one thing I know from being a yoga teacher for as long as I've been is that you can only really teach mind-body awareness through relationship. You can't do it any other way. You can't just hand someone a list and have them be more aware of your mind-body relationship. That doesn't work. It has to happen through relationship. So we started teaching the caregivers how to be in their own body and have a self-practice. Turns out that not only do we get great anecdotal stuff for patients and it changed the therapeutic relationships, turned out something really important happened for the healthcare workers. Their stress level went way down. Actually, the Environment Courage Center, because a nonprofit trying to raise money right now for the last 2 years, kind of tough, right? And the nonprofit world's kind of aching right now. Right? Their stress, the workplace was more stressful. Their stress level dropped. A big drop. Strong workplace survey is 0.4. First year, it dropped 0.5 down. Over 100 times what is a statistical significant drop, right? Their commitment to their profession, to the Courage Center. 72% of the people were going to leave, were thinking about leaving the Courage Center. That number went down to 39% within 10 weeks. 42% of people were considering leaving their profession. That number went down to 6%. Right? Turns out embodiment's good business. Thank God. Right? That the more that the caregiver is in their body, they reported quality of life improvements. They also, the mind-blowing thing is they were using mind-body techniques in 61 to 80% of all of their interactions. Now that's an incredible statistic when you think about someone that's already a seasoned professional that has a ton of knowledge in their head. To get them to like 10 to 15% is usually a big change. 61 to 80% is mind-blowing. It's because we weren't changing what they were doing. We were changing how they were doing it, how they were showing up, how they were interacting. Their quality of life improved. Simultaneously, the patient ended up with a different kind of outcome too. Our fates between the caregiver and the patient are deeply related. They're deeply connected. And we've got to just acknowledge that that's true. That you and I are in a dynamic together. That you and your patient, you and your client are in a dynamic that if you're only giving and trying to fix in that dynamic, you will burn out. That's an unsustainable strategy. You have to learn to receive in the therapeutic relationship. Because I can tell you as a patient, what happened to me was, and I think what happens in rehabilitation now and in healthcare in general, is we're creating passive patients. Right? That too much of the therapy, and think of the word, therapy, interventions, right? And they talk about patients' non-compliance. Too much of the care is happening to the patient, not with the patient. Right? The too much, I'm in too passive a position in most of my healthcare as I'm getting, especially in rehabilitation. And that's something that we can change, that can change.